Today, we are looking at one of the absolutely most breathtaking visual mysteries on our entire planet. We're talking about a natural phenomenon that is so striking, it honestly looks like a glitch in the Matrix. Literally, a line drawn right down the middle of the ocean. We're exploring the confluence of faith and oceanography, looking at this incredible natural marvel, how the Qur'an actually described it over 1,400 years ago, and exactly how modern science explains the mechanics behind it all today.
Okay, let's dive into this. What if I told you there are places on Earth where two massive, churning seas meet, flow right side by side, yet miraculously maintain their own distinct appearances? I mean, we usually think of water as something that just instantly blends together, right? Like you pour a glass of water into a bucket and boom, it's just one body of water. But out in the wild, at a massive global scale, nature behaves in some seriously mysterious ways. I want you to just imagine for a second that you're standing on a high cliff. Right below you stretches a vast, endless ocean, and two incredibly massive bodies of water are rushing straight toward each other. You can see their giant waves crashing and colliding, yet almost impossibly, one side remains this deep, dark shade, while the other side is a much lighter, striking, almost electric blue. They are clearly flowing together, actively pushing against each other, but this stark, visible boundary just remains suspended right between them. It seriously looks like an invisible wall is holding them apart.
And let me be totally clear here. This isn't just some crazy optical illusion or a camera trick. It's a very real geographical marvel happening right now across the globe. You can witness this awe-inspiring collision at the Strait of Gibraltar, right where the vast Atlantic Ocean meets the enclosed Mediterranean Sea. Or, you can travel up north to the Skagerrak Strait, where the North Sea crashes into the Baltic Sea. You can even see it in the Gulf of Alaska, where icy, pale glacial water spills out and meets the deep, dark seawater. It's an absolutely stunning visual. But naturally, it raises a big question. How on earth does this happen?
Well, before we look at modern satellite data or high-tech oceanographic sensors, the answer actually begins in ancient wisdom. Over 1,400 years ago, the Qur'an described this exact, specific oceanic phenomenon. The text states, "He released the two seas, meeting together. Between them is a barrier that they do not transgress." That's from Surah Ar-Rahman. And it beautifully captures exactly what we just visualized, right? Two bodies of water colliding, yet held in check by some sort of barrier.
And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer depth of the observation, because another verse adds a really crucial layer of detail to the puzzle. In Surah Al-Furqan, it says, "He is the one who released the two bodies of water, one fresh and sweet, the other salty and bitter, and he placed between them a barrier and an impassable boundary." Here, the text specifically identifies the stark physical contrast, the actual chemical difference between fresh water and salty, bitter water meeting in one single place. A third verse, this one from Surah Fatir, simply and elegantly notes, the two bodies of water are not alike. So across multiple references, these ancient texts clearly established a profound distinction between the waters. They look different, they taste different, and they behave differently, even when they are literally right next to each other.
To understand how this was historically interpreted, we can look back at classical Islamic scholars. Famous Quranic commentators like Ibn Kathir, Al-Tabari, and Al-Qurtubi actually examined these exact verses and wrote extensively about this concept of the Barzakh, which roughly translates to a barrier. They interpreted this Barzakh as a magnificent boundary created by divine design that allows each body of water to uniquely maintain its own distinct characteristics. They noted it as a sign in creation, recognizing that the exact form of this boundary might actually look a bit different depending on where you are in the world.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is it addresses a very common misconception. A lot of people see those viral photos of the Gulf of Alaska online and claim, oh, the two seas never mix. It's a hugely popular myth. But actually, scratch that. That is not what the Quran says, and it's certainly not what modern science says either. The Quran clearly says they meet, and modern science confirms this perfectly. The absolute truth is that they do meet and they do mix, but they mix gradually. It's a slow process, not an instant blend.
To really grasp how this gradual mixing works, we've got to look at the incredibly dynamic field of modern oceanography. When two completely different water masses meet, they don't just instantly combine like, say, pouring milk into your coffee. Instead, they form what scientists call a transition zone. And this zone is controlled by four massive forces: salinity, which is basically the salt concentration, temperature, density, and powerful ocean currents. Think of it like this. Every single sea has its own unique invisible fingerprint made up of these four properties.
When these differing fingerprints collide, they create physical, though invisible, walls in the ocean.
Scientists have very specific names for these boundaries. The first one is a halocline. This is a boundary where the water's salinity, the actual salt concentration, changes super rapidly. Because saltier water is much heavier, it literally physically resists mixing with the lighter fresh water. This creates a literal vertical barrier right there in the sea.
And this effect is compounded by our second boundary, the thermocline. This is a layer where water temperature drops or rises rapidly. You know how hot air rises and cold air sinks? Well, it's the exact same deal here. Warm and cold waters strongly resist blending. So if you have freezing glacial runoff hitting a much warmer ocean, that drastic temperature difference seriously reinforces the barrier, keeping the waters totally distinct.
And finally, we have the Pycnocline. This is essentially the master boundary, a layer where the overall water density changes rapidly. This density difference is usually driven by the combination of the salt and the temperature changes we just talked about. These sheer differences in physics are exactly what create that impassable boundary effect. They just slam the brakes on the mixing process.
But here is the amazing scientific reality underlying it all. All of Earth's oceans are intricately connected. Oceanographers actually refer to it as one single, continuous, global ocean. Water is in a state of constant, restless motion, driven by these powerful, planet-spanning ocean currents. And because of this relentless motion, despite the immense barriers of those clines we just discussed, the seas do eventually gradually blend together. Exactly as the ancient text stated, they meet.
So the crucial point for us is understanding exactly why we see that stark, dramatic line in the water to begin with. If they mix eventually, why do they look so intensely separate when they first touch? Well, the visual difference comes down to physical contents. Glacial meltwater is milky and light. River runoff carries heavy brown sediment. Different waters also host entirely different microscopic marine plants called phytoplankton, which completely change the water's tint. Add in different water depths and the angle of the sunlight hitting it, and boom, you get a dramatic visual line. The big takeaway here? The color difference simply proves they have different physical properties, not a total lack of mixing.
And here is an absolutely incredible fact that comes out of all this oceanographic physics. These transition zones, these very boundaries where freshwater and saltwater meet and push against each other, they actually create some of the richest, most unique, and diverse habitats on the entire Earth. It's an ecosystem known as an estuary, or a mixing zone. So many fish, plants, and marine animals have evolved to survive exclusively in these special dynamic environments where the two seas meet. Life literally thrives right there in the balance.
So let's take a step back for a second, because the beautiful thing about analyzing these sources is that they don't just present amazing geographical and scientific facts. They invite us to deeply reflect. Just think about the sheer physics and the incredibly delicate equilibrium required to hold two massive, crashing oceans in check. If there is a perfect, maintained balance between two mighty, untamed seas, is it not possible to find that same sense of balance in the chaos of our own lives?
It leaves us with a profound thought, really echoing the recurring question posed throughout Surah Ar-Rahman. So which of the favors of your Lord will you deny? The next time you look out at the ocean, or even just see a photo of two brilliantly colored seas colliding on your feed, don't just see water. Look a little closer. See the incredible physics, the transition zones teeming with life, and the profound ancient wisdom that pointed to this perfect design centuries ago. Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer, and keep exploring.